24-year-old girl disappeared from the store where she worked the evening shift. Police found traces of blood in the back room and signs of a struggle, but it was definitely not a robbery. The unknown perpetrator had left a full cash register. A few days later, the girl's body was found 5 kilometers from the store. The investigation of this terrible case dragged on for nearly 25 years. It was not until a quarter of a century later that it became known what had happened to Lisa Seeger. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Lisa Marie Seeger was born on March 24, 1968 in Holyoke, Massachusetts. She grew up in a close-knit family with 3 other children besides her, and they lived in a town called Agawam. From an early age, the girl loved music and learned to play several instruments. For a while, she was even a member of the school music group. After high school, Lisa went to Westfield State University, where she received her teaching degree in 1990. As an intern, she worked several shifts as a counselor at a children's camp and also taught Sunday school at her church. After that, she took a job as a teacher's aide at Agawam High School, where she had once studied herself. She spent most of her time working with a group of children with special needs. At the age of 24, she understood her students better than any other teacher. At the same time, she was very professional and tried to ensure that each of her students received the best education possible. She also worked part-time at the local card and gift store in the evenings. On Wednesday, April 15, 1992, she finished her shift at school at about 5:30 and went to the store where she worked until 9 p.m. At about 5:30 p.m., her sister Lynn briefly came in to work with her. According to her recollection, Lisa was in a good mood that evening, and nothing foretold trouble. The next morning, saleswoman Sophia Maynard arrived at the store and was scheduled to begin her shift at 9 o'clock. To her surprise, Lisa's car was in the parking lot. It was strange because the girl worked at school in the mornings and was not supposed to be in the store. In the place of classes, there was a light on inside and a sign on the door that was open. Sophia thought that Lisa might have been out for the morning shift due to the approaching Easter. They were planning to inflate balloons for sale for that holiday. Sophia walked into the store and called Lisa by name, but there was no response. When she approached the counter, she saw Lisa's things there, including her wallet and car keys. It all looked very strange, so Sophia decided to call the police. A squad arrived at the store and began their inspection. Everything looked normal in the main part of the premises, but there was a creepy opening in the back. The officer saw several crushed boxes with traces of blood on them. Later, they found several cards scattered on the floor, which also had blood on them. They also found a small dent in the door, which they thought might have been left by a heel strike. Despite all this, they were unable to find any useful leads on the store premises. It soon became known that Lisa had also failed to show up at school that morning. The principal even called her mother to ask if everything was okay, but her mother did not know where her daughter was either. The news of Lisa's disappearance quickly spread through the small town, and within hours, all of her friends, relatives, and acquaintances were on the case. The first thing the police did was to work up a theory of robbery, but that theory immediately fell away. No one had touched the money in Lisa's cash register or wallet, and all the merchandise was also there. Subsequently, detectives began to reconstruct the chronology of events that evening. They learned that Lisa's sister had left the store at about 6 p.m. After talking to employees at neighboring stores, they obtained more information. At about 7:20 p.m., Lisa spoke with the owner of the carpet store next door. They discussed a pressing problem with the local parking lot, which was being occupied by bowling alley customers. The owner told her that he himself would not risk voicing his displeasure with the drivers who parked in front of their stores because many of them, he said, were crazy and dangerous. He and Lisa talked for about 15 minutes, after which he went home. After examining the cash register, police determined that the last time money had been deposited into it was at 8:20 p.m. Detectives also found a woman who entered the store around 9:05 p.m. The door was open, but the clerk never came out. The woman thought she heard some noise from the back room but decided to leave. Thus, the police established the approximate window of Lisa's disappearance at 8:20 p.m. She served her last customer, and by 9 o'clock, something had happened to her. The detectives were determined to find out what had happened in those 40 minutes. Local investigators were assisted by the FBI and state police. Together, they organized a massive search effort. Foot squads combed the area surrounding the store, helicopters searched the more distant terrain, and police dogs were brought to the store in the hope of picking up Lisa's trail. Unfortunately, none of these efforts yielded any results. Investigators understood that Lisa had clearly not left the store of her own free will. On April 17th, 2 days after her disappearance, the head of the local police announced a reclassification of the case. It was now being investigated as a kidnapping. On Sunday morning, April 19th, all local churches prayed for Lisa to be found alive and unharmed. It was Easter, but there was no holiday spirit at all. At around 2 p.m., the police received a call. A man walking his dog on the outskirts of town near Highway 75 noticed a woman's body while walking along a wooded area. He immediately contacted law enforcement officers, who arrived on the scene and identified Lisa Seeger. They found multiple wounds on her body from a sharp object. Later, medical experts determined that the girl had also been abused. Her body was found approximately 5 kilometers from the store, suggesting that the perpetrator likely drove her there in a car. Detectives immediately cordoned off the area and proceeded with caution to avoid compromising potential evidence. It had been raining in those days, leaving several tire tracks on the soaked dirt road. Unfortunately, the police were unable to find any guns or other tangible evidence. The news that Lisa was the victim of an unknown brutal killer quickly spread throughout the city. A farewell service was held at the church where Lisa taught on Sundays, attended by nearly 1,000 people. Residents of the small town, accustomed to a quiet and safe life, fell into a state close to panic. Many shopkeepers eliminated single shifts, and colleagues walked each other to their cars. Self-defense classes became overcrowded, and about 300 women applied for permits to own firearms. The whole town feared that the unknown criminal might strike again. The police and FBI worked on the case almost around the clock. They managed to obtain a DNA sample from the crime scene that might belong to the killer. They explored the theory that Lisa's boyfriend was involved, but he had an alibi and his DNA did not match the sample. DNA testing was conducted on friends, co-workers, and relatives of the girl, again with no matches. The police received numerous tips from local residents, some reporting sightings of a suspicious car on the night of Lisa's murder. Others claimed to know the name of the culprit. However, all these leads led nowhere, and detectives sifted through them. From the tire tracks on the road near where the body was found, the police determined that they had been left by a van or large SUV. Detectives questioned all drivers of similar vehicles but were no closer to catching the perpetrator. However, they did find a witness who may have seen the same vehicle. An employee of a store near where Lisa worked was driving home at around 9:15 p.m. While standing at a traffic light, she saw a large SUV pulling off the road and heading toward the place where Lisa's body would later be found. The woman could not provide a detailed description of the car due to the darkness, but noted that she believed there was a man and a woman in the car. She also mentioned the odd fact that when the car pulled into the dirt road, the woman's head was twitching unnaturally, as if she were asleep or unconscious. Unfortunately, this information also did not lead to a suspect, have since come to an end. The police continued to work on the case, but with each passing month, hope of solving this macabre mystery faded. A year and a half passed before Lisa's family and friends were given a new chance to discover the truth. In October 1993, national television aired an episode devoted to the case. The popular program filmed stories about unsolved cases, which drew enormous attention to them. Sometimes, this led to new witnesses coming forward to the police, and the case got a second wind. Lisa's case was no exception. Within an hour of the broadcast, the police received several hundred calls from people who had some kind of information. As is usually the case, most of these leads led nowhere, but the police worked through each and every one of them. According to the detective, they were able to identify a few valuable leads, but they did not specify which ones. Unfortunately, it also went nowhere. As the years went by, the chances of solving the case steadily declined. Lisa's family went to great lengths to ensure that her legacy was not forgotten. Although her teaching career was cut short early on, Lisa's relatives made a major contribution to the Agawam education system. In 1995, her parents donated $11,000 to the science division of the school where Lisa worked. These funds went to buy equipment and support genetics classes. The parents also set up a fund to help gifted students, which distributed about $35,000 in awards. 10 years had passed since Lisa's murder. Her mother had not given up hope that the case would ever be solved. She went to great lengths to support the memory of her daughter. Her mother took part in every interview, answered reporters' questions, and every year she gathered hundreds of people to honor Lisa's memory and light candles. Meanwhile, the police had only one piece of significant evidence on their hands, a DNA sample from the alleged killer. They kept checking it against known criminal databases, hoping that the right person would turn up sooner or later. But year after year, it didn't. In September 2016, 24 years after Lisa's murder, investigators decided to try a new method, DNA phenotyping. Its essence is the following: based on the information embedded in a person's DNA, experts determine the features of their appearance and build an assumed portrait. Using DNA, specialists can find out the sex, approximate age, eye and hair color. The portrait generated from this data is not always accurate, but sometimes the coincidence with the face of a real person is amazing. Based on the DNA of Lisa's alleged killer, experts presented two portraits of the suspect, one at age 25 and another at age 50. When the police department published these portraits, they received more than 170 calls. These people reported seeing a similar man, But most of these leads also led nowhere. Only a year later, on September 18, 2017, the police suddenly made a high-profile announcement: the perpetrator had been arrested. He turned out to be a 49-year-old man named Gary Shara. The news instantly went viral throughout the American media. Cases where the police find the killer after a quarter of a century are very rare, so such stories immediately attract a huge amount of public attention. Immediately after Shara's arrest, investigators revealed how they had managed to track him down. It turned out that the man had been considered a suspect back in 1993, a year after Lisa's murder. Remember that program on national television after which the police received hundreds of calls with potential leads? One of the callers was a lawyer from Seattle. He told detectives that his client might have information about Lisa's murder. She was a woman who was in the process of divorcing her husband. They lived in a town called Longmeadow, which was near Agawam. According to the woman, her husband was showing increased attention to Lisa Seigert's case. If this murder was on television, he would run into the room and stare blankly at the screen, totally unresponsive to those around him. As you may have realized, this man was Gary Shara. He was 24 years old at the time. He was in a very troubled marriage and had a 1-year-old son. He and his wife were constantly fighting and had already begun divorce proceedings shortly after the birth of their child. According to the police statement, they had worked out the theory that Gary was involved back in 1993 but found no evidence to support it. On the contrary, his ex-wife, as a source of information, raised doubts. The fact is that she had a whole list of mental disorders as well as a long history of alcohol abuse. Moreover, during the divorce, Gary obtained custody of their son through the courts, but his wife secretly removed the child to another state. Another important fact to add here is that this was by no means the first time that former or current wives had called the police, saying that their husbands might be involved in Lisa's murder. Surprisingly, there were indeed many such calls. So, the detectives thought that Gary's case was just one of those. Even so, they questioned him, but the man denied his involvement and refused to give a DNA sample. No one could legally force him to give a sample, so the police essentially had no other options. Later, detectives compiled a list of all the men questioned in the case who refused to give a DNA sample. Gary was among them, and the police called him in for questioning several more times. During the third interview in 2008, it was apparent that Gary was trying not to touch anything, not even the table. He was offered a bottle of water, but he refused. He looked as if he had only one thing on his mind: how the cops wouldn't get his DNA sample. By 2017, detectives had a list of 11 suspects on their hands, including Gary. All of them had been interviewed at various stages of the investigation and refused to voluntarily submit to DNA testing. In fact, there were many more suspects on that list, but through DNA phenotyping, investigators were able to weed out unsuitable candidates. They did not match some of the characteristics that experts determined from the DNA sample of Lisa's killer. In August 2017, detectives gathered all available information and went to court. They asked for an order compelling all the list members to provide DNA samples, and the court agreed. On September 13th of that same year, police went to Gary's apartment to notify him of this obligation, but the man was not home. The door was opened by his neighbor, with whom they shared an apartment. The detectives left him their business card and asked him to give the information to Gary urgently. The very next day, something unexpected happened. Gary's current girlfriend came to the police station and reported that he had left 3 letters in her apartment. To the researchers' surprise, among them was an apology to the Seigert family and a detailed confession of Lisa's murder on 2 sheets. Gary wrote that he had had violent and uncontrollable desires in him since childhood. He was obsessed with thoughts of kidnapping and abuse. That evening, as he drove past Lisa, Gary, as he himself articulated in a letter, allowed himself to do something horrible. The man specified that he did not plan to kill Lisa, but events allegedly got out of his control. Gary wrote that he wanted to surrender to the police hundreds of times but could not do so because of cowardice. He stated that he had lived with self-loathing all these years. At the end of the letter, he stated that he planned to end his life. Police immediately began searching for Gary, and soon his car was spotted in the parking lot of a hospital in Stafford Springs. There was another suicide note on the windshield. It turned out the man had ingested some powerful drugs but got in his car immediately afterwards and rushed to the nearest hospital, where he was pumped out. As soon as the doctors were finished helping him, the police arrested Gary and took him to the station. At the same time, a judge issued a search warrant for his apartment as well as his girlfriend's apartment. There, the police seized several objects containing his DNA. The result of the analysis surprised no one, a complete match with the sample of the killer. Along with that, detectives uncovered several other potentially significant leads. Gary's wife, who had reported suspicions about him back in 1993, passed away in 2014. However, investigators were able to find documents drafted by her lawyer where the woman revealed many gruesome details. One day, Gary told her in plain language that he could not engage in intimacy with her unless he had a knife in his hand. The day after Lisa's murder, the woman called her sister and told her that Gary had come home late at night, was extremely disturbed, and his body was covered with scratches. He also gave his wife a music box and said that he had bought it at the very store where Lisa worked, except, according to Gary himself, it was an older woman with gray hair who sold it to him. The problem is that no such employee has ever been there. It is not clear why all these details were not reported to the police in 1993, and it is impossible to find out now. While in custody, Gary suddenly proclaimed his innocence and refused to confess to what he had done. In all likelihood, he was driven by simple fear. But with that kind of evidence, there was no chance of getting away with it. The only thing he was able to achieve was a postponement of his sentence. The trial was not to begin until 2 years later, but Gary, who had been in a cell the whole time, suddenly decided to confess. On September 21, 2019, he appeared before a judge and pleaded guilty to the murder of Lisa Seegert. This charge qualified as first-degree murder, and in Massachusetts, a defendant on such a sentence faces life in prison without parole. Lisa's family was present in the courtroom. Her mother, who had hoped for 25 years to learn the truth, spoke. She thanked everyone involved in the investigation, as well as the ordinary concerned people who had supported her family all this time. As a result, the killer went to live out the rest of his life behind bars. One of the state's longest-running criminal cases was officially closed. Despite the fact that it took a quarter of a century, the bitter truth in such a case is anything better than endless ignorance. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. Click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for more content like this. In 1999, a mysterious disappearance occurred in the United States that still haunts people's minds today. An 11-year-old girl was left alone for 90 seconds and literally vanished. Years later, police would find a bill with "I am alive" written on it in the girl's name. In this video, we've compiled all the information we have on what happened to Michaela Biggs on January 2, 1999 in the American city of Mesa, Arizona. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. 2 sisters, 11-year-old Michaela and 9-year-old Kimber, were walking close to home. It was a chilly evening, and it was just beginning to get dark outside. Despite the height of winter, Arizona is a warm southern state, so Michaela brought her bike and rode alongside her sister. At one point, the girls thought they heard the sound of an approaching ice cream truck. They put speakers on them and turned on music to alert children to the approach of a favorite treat. The girls hurried home to ask their mother and change for ice cream, then returned to the street. However, the ice cream truck was nowhere to be found, and the girls began to wait. At some point, Kimber got cold. She told her sister that she would run inside to get a jacket and come back. When she arrived back, Michaela was no longer there. The bike was lying on the road with its wheels still spinning. Beside it lay the 2 coins the girls had prepared to buy ice cream. Kimber came home and told her mother that Michaela was missing. Neither she nor her mother had yet allowed even the thought that anything could have happened to the girl. The mother thought that Michaela had gone to a neighbor with whom the family was friendly, but the girl was not there, and the mother realized that something terrible might have happened to her daughter. Immediately thereafter, she went to the police. It is worth noting that the police response was very fast. Already in 30 minutes, a helicopter was in the air. The law enforcers stopped all suspicious cars, bypassed the surrounding houses. That day, volunteers from the girls' school handed out and posted flyers with her picture. Those pictures would later appear in storefronts and on billboards along roads throughout Arizona. Police searched dumpsters and inspected hundreds of homes. Detective Butch Gates and Jerry Giselle were assigned to the case. The cops questioned every ice cream vendor in the state and could not establish that at least one of them was in that area at the time of the girl's disappearance. Detectives reconstructed the chronology of events and came to an eerie conclusion: the girl disappeared in just 90 seconds. That's how long Kimber had been missing. The spinning wheel on the bicycle confirmed the fact that the abduction had taken place extremely quickly. Search dogs, the help of which was used by the investigation, could not get a trace of the girl. And when they did, they took only a few steps in the direction of the road. The fact that the dog takes the mark of the person only when the missing person left on their feet only reinforced the main version of the police. The girl was put in a car, taken away, and it all happened in a matter of seconds. The situation was complicated by the complete lack of witnesses. Despite the fact that the girls were playing in a street filled with houses, none of the neighbors saw them that night. Later, there was information that a man tried to kidnap the 2 girls right out of school. The children were 10 and 11 years old at the time. Police checked the information for a connection to the disappearance of Michaela, who was just 11, but the kidnapping turned out to be a failed prank. There was less and less evidence, so police began working out the standard theories. When a child goes missing, parents and other relatives are always checked. Given that Michaela's mother was at home at the time of the kidnapping, investigators took on the girl's father, Darian Biggs. From the beginning, no one really believed in his involvement. Why would a father kidnap his own daughter, especially in such a way, in the middle of the street, in a short period of time when his other daughter was running home? However, it soon became clear that the man had lied about his alibi. During the first interrogation, he stated that he was at work at the time of the abduction, which turned out to be untrue. In reality, he was spending time with his mistress. What happened next was even more interesting. The man failed the polygraph questioning, and his wife admitted that she knew about the cheating. Darian himself had told her about it a month before it happened. The couple thought about divorce. Despite the fake alibi, the police eventually stopped considering the father as a suspect. Even in the event of a divorce, his wife had no plans to forbid him from seeing his children. He simply had no motive. In addition, the detectives acknowledged that the lie detector results may have been influenced by the emotional state of the father, whose daughter had just been abducted. He may even have laid some of the blame on himself and thought that if he had been home with his family, the tragedy could have been avoided. Detectives also tracked Darian's movements that evening and determined that he simply would not have had time to hide Michaela. The man showed up at home very quickly after his spouse called him to report his daughter missing. Detective Giselle later stated that Michaela most likely did not know her abductor. If it had been the father, she would not have thrown the bicycle and change on the ground. The girl tried to run away from the stranger but simply did not make it. During the investigation, police regularly had leads that led nowhere. An anonymous man called detectives and reported that Michaela's body was in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. Police combed the area but found nothing. Later, they received an email from an anonymous man claiming that he was the one who had kidnapped the girl. The FBI fairly quickly traced the sender's IP address and sent a SWAT team to his home in the city of Phoenix. It turned out that the sender was a 12-year-old boy who had just decided to make a joke. Meanwhile, the police had reached a stalemate, beginning to process even the most incomprehensible theories. They combed through 35 abandoned gold mines in the county and then even questioned nearly 500 psychics who could supposedly help the investigation. Of course, this went nowhere. One witness was found who had seen a mint-colored Jeep shortly before Michaela was kidnapped. The driver was quickly found and proved innocent. After that, the police were already desperate to find the girl because there was literally not a single clue left in front of them. This went on until September 27, 1999, when the quiet county was shocked by another event. A woman living near Biggs returned home and walked into the kitchen to find a middle-aged man with his pants unbuttoned. Without uttering a word, he jumped on the woman and began strangling and abusing her. The perpetrator then set fire to the house and left. Apparently, the attacker thought his victim was dead, but the woman survived. Her neck was broken, but she was able to reach the phone and call an ambulance. Already on her way to the hospital, she whispered to the doctors from her last breath, "Michaela Biggs, the girl who is missing, he took her, you must save her." The whole town was shocked again, and events swirled rapidly. The police took up the case and arrested the assailant. He turned out to be D. Bullock, a well-known alcoholic in the area who lived with his wife and 3 children, repaired wrecked cars, and occasionally disrupted public order. His house was only 2 blocks from Biggs. D. was one of the first to volunteer to help find Michaela and willingly let the police into the house to search, but not into the trailer in the backyard. For the trailer, he demanded a warrant. This behavior was extremely bizarre. A man with a bad reputation volunteering to help find a missing girl, giving the police a look around his house without any questions, and suddenly forbidding them to look in the trailer. From then on, Bullock became the prime suspect, even though his wife provided him with an alibi for the time Michaela was kidnapped. No one believed her story, and most likely she was just afraid of her husband. Detectives began digging into Bullock's past and discovered that he had been tried 3 times for violence and molestation, as well as for kidnapping minors. He didn't get out of prison until 1995. And at that time, none of the neighbors had any idea what kind of monster lived next door. Several times a week, Michaela took private piano lessons from a neighbor who lived across the street from Bullock's house. This suggested that the man may have known the girl long before she disappeared. After Bullock was arrested for assaulting the woman, the police searched his house again and planned to investigate the trailer he had kept them out of earlier. But they were disappointed. The trailer had disappeared without a trace. This was a major blow to Michaela's parents. They were sure their daughter was there, alive or not, but she had disappeared, and the police were unable to trace her location. Bullock was sentenced to 15.5 years in prison for the September 27, 1999 attack on the woman. He categorically denied any involvement in Michaela's disappearance. This was not surprising, for the attack on his neighbor and the atrocities he committed. 15 years in prison would be a lenient sentence by U.S. standards. A confession to kidnapping an 11-year-old girl, on the other hand, could have landed him straight in the electric chair. The parents could not accept that their only hope for the truth was gone. The mother and father wrote Bullock a letter directly to the prison, asking the ultimate question: whether he had anything to do with Michaela's disappearance. No one hoped to get a confession, but the criminal's answer took them by surprise. He wrote that the conversation was too personal and suggested that her parents visit him in prison. At that moment, hope rekindled in the hearts of the parents. The Bullock would confess, but they were greatly disappointed sitting across from the perpetrator. The father asked if he had anything to do with his daughter's disappearance. Bullock simply replied that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes, after which the perpetrator simply picked up and left accompanied by security. It looked as if he was just teasing the parents, giving them false hope and destroying it by looking them in the eye. For a sadist like Bullock, the suffering of others can bring unsurpassed pleasure. This is apparently why he arranged the meeting with the grief-stricken parents. Afterwards, Michaela's father confessed that he was convinced that Bullock was involved. He stated, "I was sitting a few feet away from the guy who killed my daughter and there was nothing I could do about it." At this point, even the most staunch hopes of solving the case were abandoned. Absolutely everyone believed that no new leads would ever emerge. Years later, they would realize that they were wrong, but more on that later. On the 5th anniversary of Michaela's disappearance, the parents buried an empty coffin, finally saying goodbye to their daughter. During this time, their marriage broke up. They changed residence and were reluctant to contact journalists. Until 2018, the case went into a long drawer. The police simply had nothing to work with. But out of the blue, an event occurred that stirred up all of America. On March 14, 2018, a dollar bill was accidentally dropped at a police station in Neenah, Wisconsin. On it was written in stubby handwriting, "My name is Michaela Biggs, kidnapped from Mass, I am alive." The bill was found by a local resident who was collecting coins and dollar bills in a jar. He was the one who came across the dollar, after which he reported the find to the police, and they instantly reopened the investigation. Michaela's mother rushed nearly 2,000 miles away to look at the handwriting and see if the message was actually written by her daughter. Other relatives also came to the station, but they all made a disappointing statement. The handwriting looked nothing like Michaela's, and the name was misspelled. The mother suggested that the bill might be someone's extremely unfortunate prank. The other relatives also supported this theory. Despite this, the police attempted to trace the bill's path. Alas, it was almost impossible to do so. Paper money changes owners so many times that it was impossible to find the author of this inscription. Experts who studied the bill suggested that the inscription was made by an adult man who was trying to imitate the handwriting of a child. Despite all this, the message on the paper bill seems highly suspicious. Could it have been someone's prank? The chance of police and relatives finding out about the bill are extremely slim. It could have been passed around for years, or it could have settled in a bank vault and no one would have noticed it. The fact that it ended up in the hands of a concerned person who reported it to the police is more of a miracle than inevitability. As for the handwriting, the most obvious version cannot be ruled out. Michaela may have written in a hurry for fear of being caught. Besides, she had been missing for 9 years before the bill appeared. Assuming someone held her captive, did they give her something to write all that time? In 9 years without practice, handwriting can change beyond recognition. There is another question no one knows the answer to. How long ago was this writing made? The bill could have been in circulation for years, or it could have appeared shortly before it was discovered. It's worth remembering about Bullock, who was supposed to be released from prison in 2017. Perhaps this evil prank is his doing, suffice it to recall how he tormented unhappy parents by giving them false hope. Perhaps we will never know the answer to all these questions again, or this case will once again shake the world with unexpected details. Kimber, who was the last person to see her older sister before she was kidnapped, still can't forget that gruesome January night. For a long time, she blamed herself for going home to get her jacket. But now she realizes against an adult kidnapper, she would have been helpless. Kimber raises her young son, to whom she constantly talks about his Aunt Michaela. She calls her an angel who looks out for him. The girl, as well as the rest of her family, are sure that Michaela was kidnapped by Bullock. But without evidence, it can never be proved unless the criminal himself decides to confess in order to deal another blow to the missing girl's family. Do you think there's any hope that the writing on the bill was done by Michaela herself and she is still alive? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Also, don't forget to like the video if you like it. Take care of yourself and your loved one. In a foreign, tranquil American town, a horrific incident sent shockwaves through the community. A young girl vanished from her own residence, leaving behind her personal belongings, phone and car without a single clue. As time went on, the investigation of this puzzling case started mirroring a conventional detective series, with one stark distinction: this was all unfolding in reality. The small town became immersed in an ambience of fear and suspicion, for the girl's disappearance potentially implicated any of its residents. However, it took a staggering 12 years for the chilling truth to be unveiled, reverberating throughout the entire world. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Tara Grinstead was born in 1974 in Hawkinsville, USA. During her high school years, she actively participated in beauty contests, winning prizes. From an early age, Tara set a goal to obtain a quality education, so she saved the money earned from competitions to pay for her studies. After college, Tara earned a master's degree in education and landed her dream job as a high school history teacher in Ocilla, Georgia. Ocilla was a tiny town, typical of low-rise America, with a population of no more than 4,000 people who mostly knew each other well. Life in Ocilla was quiet and predictable, with no one suspecting that any serious crime could occur there. Tara Grinstead had worked at the local school for several years and had built strong relationships with both staff and students. She was known as a kind and outgoing person, always supportive and helpful. In October 2005, her help became valuable to her students who were preparing for a local beauty pageant. The girls were thrilled to have Tara's support. On Saturday, October 22nd, Tara assisted the students with their final preparations for the pageant. Afterward, she attended a picnic with her high school friends and didn't return home until 11 p.m. She parked her car outside under a carport, and from that point on, Tara ceased all contact. Her mother, who lived in another city, grew increasingly worried as Tara always picked up the phone or returned calls. However, this time, there was no answer. On Monday, October 24th, Tara's anxiety peaked when she didn't show up for work. This behavior was highly unusual for her, as she took her job seriously and would have informed her superiors if she needed time off. Concerned acquaintances contacted Police Chief Billy Hancock and asked him to check on her well-being. At 10 a.m., he went to her address, initially assuming her phone was dead or that she was sick and had overslept. When Chief Hancock arrived at Tara's house, he found her car in its usual spot with unlocked doors, which was not surprising in such a small town where car theft wasn't a concern. He noticed an envelope on the dashboard containing $100 in cash, which was already strange, considering Tara's responsible nature. Billy knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Deciding to investigate further, he explored the house. At first glance, everything seemed perfectly ordinary with no signs of struggle or break-in. However, in Tara's bedroom, he discovered a real mess, highly uncharacteristic for her. Her belongings, including the clothes she had last been seen in, were strewn on the floor. Her cell phone was on the nightstand, charging, indicating that Tara had left the house briefly, but she was nowhere to be found. Outside the house, the police found a latex glove, a potential piece of evidence suggesting foul play. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the equivalent of the FBI at the state level, became involved in the case. The primary focus of the investigation was kidnapping, with little evidence beyond the latex glove. Detectives found two more curious items: Tara's torn chain on the bedroom floor and her alarm clock out of place. However, these findings did not provide much help in solving the mystery of her disappearance. For the small town, that Monday was a truly dreadful day. Tara's house was cordoned off, and the school held a meeting where Sarah's co-workers and students rallied to support the search effort. Volunteers formed a group, printing out flyers with Tara's picture and information about her disappearance. Within hours, the flyers were posted throughout the city. Volunteers stayed home until 1 a.m., while agents from the Bureau of Investigation interviewed Tara's neighbors and thoroughly investigated the neighborhood. Sniffer dogs were brought in to aid the search, hoping to pick up Tara's trail if she had left on foot. Simultaneously, the latex glove was handed over to experts to collect as much data as possible. The investigators clung to the hope that they would find Tara and unravel the mystery behind her sudden vanishing. Despite the efforts to find a match in the FBI database, investigators obtained a DNA sample from the scene of Tara's disappearance, but it did not yield any matches. All they knew was that the sample belonged to a man. Frustratingly, this led to no breakthroughs, and Tara seemed to have vanished as if into thin air from her own home. In a new direction, investigators delved into Tara's personal life and past, a common approach when a woman goes missing. Often, someone from her inner circle is implicated. After scrutinizing Tara's romantic relationships, detectives focused on Marcus Harper, a former policeman and military officer with whom Tara had been in a relationship. However, no solid suspects emerged during the investigation. Tara had initiated the breakup about a year before her disappearance, desiring to build a family while Marcus was not ready for that commitment. Despite their separation, they maintained a cordial relationship, communicating via calls and texts. Detectives later unearthed an intriguing detail. Marcus had visited Uzola 3 weeks prior to Tara's disappearance, but he had not informed her. Learning about Marcus's visit through mutual acquaintances deeply upset Tara, prompting her repeated calls to him in an attempt to understand why he had kept it a secret. Tara's emotional state escalated into hysteria, causing great concern among her relatives, who worried she might act recklessly. However, she eventually regained composure, and the police did not consider Marcus a suspect. Their relationship had ended, and no apparent motive for the crime could be established. The investigation took another twist when it was revealed that Tara had received threats from a former student. On March 30, 2005, 7 months prior to her disappearance, the student had gone to Tara's house and displayed extremely aggressive behavior. When Tara refused to let him in, he began banging on the door, prompting neighbors to call the police. It was discovered that the young man had been infatuated with Tara since high school, and according to acquaintances, he exhibited emotional instability and peculiar, even alarming behavior. Tara had tried to assist him with his problems for a while, but his mental state only deteriorated. After the incident of him attempting to break into her house, Tara filed a report against him, genuinely fearing for her safety. The investigation continued with these new leads, as detectives explored the possibilities surrounding the troubled former student and his potential involvement in Tara's disappearance. After Tara's disappearance, the police tracked down the young man who had previously threatened her. He was working in a neighboring town approximately 150 kilometers away from Mesilla. The young man provided detectives with an alibi for the nights surrounding Tara's disappearance, making it difficult to establish his involvement in the case. Additionally, a business card belonging to a police officer was found in Tara's house. It was discovered that Tara had been dating this officer for some time, but at the time of her disappearance, he had already relocated to another city. The policeman also provided an alibi for the time period in question, effectively removing him from the list of suspects. With no solid leads at hand, the police made the decision to organize a search for Tara 2 weeks after she went missing. This delayed response raised questions, as it was evident from the beginning that Tara had not left her home willingly. Hundreds of volunteers were called upon to search the surrounding area, combing through forests, ditches, and rivers. Unfortunately, not a single trace of Tara was found during the search. During this time, there was also a report of a housing car burning down near Tara's residence. The locals, almost unanimously, believed that the incident was connected to her disappearance. Speculation arose, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been attempting to cover their tracks, or the residents, deeply shocked and frightened, found every event suspicious in light of Tara's mysterious vanishing. Despite the exhaustive search efforts, the police faced the harsh reality that they had run out of leads. The following years brought no closer to solving the mystery surrounding Tara's disappearance. However, in 2009, an unexpected event thrust Tara Grinstead back into the spotlight. A YouTube channel was created by an unidentified user, featuring an eerie video. The video depicted a man whose face was obscured and voice altered, claiming involvement in the disappearances of 16 girls, including Tara Grinstead. The man further stated that he had securely hidden the bodies and would provide clues about their burial sites in subsequent videos. The police swiftly investigated the video and confirmed that all 16 names mentioned did indeed belong to missing women. The FBI managed to track down the creator of the video, a 27-year-old man named Andrew Haley. Upon his arrest, Andrew claimed that it was all a joke. The police, however, could not establish any connection between Andrew and the missing girls. Nevertheless, Andrew faced charges of perjury and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 2 years of forced labor and 13 years of probation. The momentary hopes of solving this cold case faded once again, leaving the police without any viable leads. In December 2010, Tara Grinstead was officially declared dead due to the lack of evidence. As the years went by, the townspeople retained vivid memories of Tara's disappearance, but the discussion of her case became increasingly infrequent, confined behind closed doors. The impact of Tara's disappearance had forever altered the town, leaving behind a lingering atmosphere of fear and mistrust for years to come. In 2016, journalist Payne Lindsay from Atlanta created a podcast dedicated to unsolved mysteries, with the Tara Grinstead case as its first focus. Alongside private investigator Morris Godwin, they traveled to Asilla and started working on the case with limited access to police records. Their main source of information became the townspeople. Initially, they could only speak to Tara's friends and relatives, as outsiders avoided discussing the missing girl. However, Lindsay's enthusiasm reignited interest in the case, prompting discussions throughout Asilla. Lindsay and Godwin painstakingly explored every lead, considering 3 possible suspects: Tara's ex-boyfriends and the students who had attempted to break into her house. Along the way, they interviewed anyone who might have valuable information. The duo's passion for the case led them to believe that a breakthrough was just within reach on several occasions. One day, Lindsay received an anonymous call suggesting they search Tara's property for remains. The police followed the tip, but the discovered bones were determined to be of animal origin. Despite the excitement and renewed interest generated by the podcast, no significant progress was made in solving the case during its creation. However, the amateur investigation proved crucial for the eventual breakthrough. In early 2017, Brooke Sheridan approached the police with a shocking story. She revealed that her ex-boyfriend, Bo Dukes, had confessed to helping his friend dispose of Tara Grinstead's body. Initially skeptical due to the recent surge in attention surrounding the case, the detectives cautiously approached the matter. They equipped Brooke with a wire and instructed her to seek a confession from Bo Dukes. To their surprise, Bo did not deny his involvement when confronted by Brooke wearing the wire. This provided the police with probable cause to arrest him. Bo cooperated fully with the investigation, revealing the truth behind Tara's disappearance. According to Bo's account, his friend and former classmate, Ryan Duke, had called him late one night requesting to borrow a truck for an undisclosed task. Ryan then disclosed that he had broken into Tara Grinstead's house to steal money, but something had gone wrong, leading to her death. Ryan claimed that after a party, while under the influence of drugs, he decided to break into a house to find money, ultimately choosing Tara's residence. A struggle ensued between Tara and Ryan, resulting in her death. Bo arrived at Tara's house with a truck, and together they loaded her body into it before driving her to a wooded area where they disposed of her remains. The shocking nature of this revelation rocked the residents of Wasilla. Bo Dukes and Ryan Duke had never been considered suspects, as there was no apparent motive or evidence linking them to Tara's disappearance. Despite Bo's full confession, he chose not to testify against himself in court. During the trial, he expressed remorse and apologized to Tara's relatives for his actions, shedding tears for what he had done. Bo Dukes, who had an extensive military background with numerous decorations, was found guilty of helping cover up Tara Grinstead's murder. His sentencing included 25 years in prison. Ryan Duke's murder trial for Tara Grinstead was initially scheduled for April 1, 2019, but it was postponed on March 28, 2019, by the Georgia Supreme Court due to the alleged denial of funding for expert witnesses on Duke's behalf. The trial finally commenced on May 9, 2022. During the trial, Ryan Duke pleaded not guilty to murder, while Bo Dukes was charged with murder. On May 20, 2022, the jury found Ryan Duke not guilty of murder and aggravated assault but guilty of concealment of death. Ryan Duke testified in court, stating that his previous confessions to the murder were false, claiming that he had made them under the influence of drugs and out of fear of the actual killer, a friend with a similar last name, Bo Dukes. Ryan Duke testified that Bo Dukes woke him up in their shared mobile home in 2005 and confessed to killing Tara Grinstead, showing him her purse and wallet as evidence. Although Tara's body was never found, investigators matched her DNA to bone fragments discovered in the location Ryan Duke had mentioned. On May 23, 2022, Ryan Duke was sentenced by the judge in Irwin County Superior Court to 10 years in prison for concealing the body. This was the maximum penalty allowed. By the time of his sentencing, Ryan Duke had already served approximately half of that sentence. Throughout the trial, prosecutors argued that Duke's confession contained details that only the actual killer could have known, such as the phone call he claimed to have made from a payphone to Tara Grinstead's home after running away and returning to find her gone. Duke's DNA was also found on a latex glove discovered in Grinstead's yard. However, his testimony created enough doubt in the minds of the jury, leading to his acquittal on all charges except concealing her death. Bo Dukes was subpoenaed to testify but invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and refused to answer the court's questions. When the truth about this high-profile case was revealed, Tara Grinstead's friends and relatives finally found some relief from the burden of uncertainty. Tara's mother admitted that she had secretly hoped for a miracle all these years, hoping that her daughter would return alive. Unfortunately, reality proved to be cruel, senseless, and devoid of miracles. At least now, the entire world knows the truth about what happened in that small town back in 2005. If you like this video, write your opinion about it and give it a like. Take care and thanks for